Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
We've all had bad dates, right? This is the only date I've had to date that rang every alarm bell and waved every red flag. I'll preface this by saying I don't go on many dates, but when I do I make sure I follow safety protocol by only meeting my date in public places, let either family or friends know where I'm going, and park in a populated place close by to wherever we meet. Anyway, this date initially suggested we meet at his house to watch a movie and have a few drinks, and I said no, I don't feel comfortable with that and I only want to meet in public. He seemed alright with this, but then brought it up a few more times, and I said if money is an issue we can meet up another time or forget about it altogether. But my date backtracked and went with my idea of meeting at a cafe I chose. I was familiar with this cafe and equidistant to where we both lived. Anyway, he turns up in a two-door car. This detail is relevant and goes into the cafe, and I follow behind and introduce myself. After a polite introduction, things begin to get weird. I order a Coke and he says, "Don't you want a drink?" I was going to pop into the bar, which is connected to the cafe, and get one. I say no, I'm not drinking, and he looks at me like, "What do you mean?" as if I'm being unreasonable. I already explained in messages I don't drink as I'm on medication, so having to explain it again pissed me off. He seems disappointed and goes to order a cider from the bar while I get a table. Anyway, we sit down with our drinks and the date immediately goes on about going back to his place again, even though the original plan was to stay here and order food, and I already stated that was not happening. He says something along the lines of having a few drinks and eating at his place, and I said we don't have to eat, we can just have our drinks and leave. He gets defensive and says he has money but prefers it if we go back to his. I make a joke and say, "You're not a killer, are you?" And instead of laughing it off, he stares at me uncannily and says, "You don't think I would hurt you, do you?" I laugh uncomfortably and say of course not, but really I'm relieved this date won't be going any further. Date suddenly says, "Are you going to follow me in your car, because that wouldn't make sense. How about we go in my car, but I've got packages in the front so you'll have to squeeze in the back and I'll drop you back off to your car after." A reality that made less sense than me following him in my own car and then driving home from this house after. The fact it was completely illogical made it even more creepy in my mind. Every alarm bell was going off at this point. I said, "Look, I don't want to go to yours and your insistence is giving me the creeps." Date looks shocked, mumbles something about needing the toilet, and excuses himself from the table. A few moments later, I see him through the cafe window getting into his car and driving off. Massive bullet dodged in my opinion. Also, the fact his car didn't have back doors made it even more sinister, because imagine if something happened in the car and I couldn't escape. This story happened 15 years ago and I still have shivers in my spine when I think about it. I was a student at a small university where everyone knew each other. All the students in my class were very close to each other. There weren't many of us, so solidarity was the normal. During the third year, 15 Chinese students joined our class, 14 girls and only one man. The girls were very nice and we welcomed them with open arms. They integrated very quickly. The man meanwhile hardly ever spoke. He was very secretive, dressed quite extravagantly, and was always hyper tense or stressed. My closest friends and I tried to push him out of his comfort zone a bit. We used to help each other with studies. We thought that was normal. We quickly realized that it was a mistake. When he spoke to us, which was rare, his words were incomprehensible. He was completely delirious. He always told us about his fascination for death, that music made him want to kill people, that he hated women. We tried not to judge him and just work, but he became more and more comfortable with us, and every day he told us more and more horrible things. After a while, it was rumored that he was harassing a lot of girls in our university. He managed to get their phone number and was calling them day and night, or he was following them down the street to their house. It was extremely creepy and scary for everyone. One girl in particular really didn't appreciate him following her and filed a complaint against him. He was questioned by the police as well as by the headmaster of the university and asked to go to the hospital for a psychiatric treatment. We didn't see him for a few months after that, so we thought he was off for treatment. Then one day, suddenly he reappeared in class, but his gaze had become extremely disturbing. He stared at people for tens of minutes as if he was going to jump at their throats. I felt very bad that day. And then, one day, I learned from a friend that he had come to university with a huge butcher's knife. He wanted to kill the girl who reported him to the police, but since she wasn't in college that day, he went to see her mother, who worked as a secretary in our department, and he killed her. Some teachers present in the building tried to stop him and they were seriously injured. Finally, he was able to be subdued and put in a psychiatric hospital for the rest of his life. This story traumatized us all, and even years later we never talk about it between us. It was absolutely horrible. After that I left university because it had become unbearable. After a long week, I was feeling the need to unwind, so I accepted an invitation from one of my friends to join her and a few others for a night at one of the local bars. We played pool, we danced a bit, and we had a few beers. I'm not much of a drinker, it messes with my metabolism, but I had a few pints of beer. I'm 6'1", it's something that works in the world of fighting, but it has, in the past, been a severe source of insecurity for me. Over the years, I've learned to just embrace the insecurities, but every now and then it rears its ugly head. Most of the guys and girls that I date are shorter than me. That's totally fine, but when someone that's 6'5" comes my way and shows interest, I'm more likely to be interested. Maybe it's shallow, maybe it's insecurity. I really don't know, but that's not entirely the point of this story. This guy was very cool. He was an athlete, funny, cute, charming, the whole 9 yards. I beat him at a game of pool. We danced, we had a shot, just had a fun time over the course of a few hours. We exchanged numbers and all was good. Come closing time, he asked if he could walk me to my car. That sounded lovely, and I told him as such. We walked to my car and I thanked him for a fun evening. He grabbed me by the waist and pulled me in for a kiss. I wasn't exactly ready for one, so I gave him a side kiss and told him to give me a call for a date. This was apparently not good enough. He wrapped his arms around my waist tighter and pulled me in. I pushed him away and said that I wasn't the kind of person to kiss someone I just met, and I preferred for him to leave me be. This was also not good enough for him apparently, and he pulled me closer. Yeah bro, not going to fly with someone like me. He attempted to nuzzle my neck, but I sent a knee to his groin, then gave him a right hook to the chin. He got noticeably angry, completely opposite of the cool and collected individual he had been all night, and started charging at me. I gave him a few hits to the face and few kicks to his side. The whole time he was attempting to hit me, and a few actually hit me, but eventually he got up and said, and I quote, "You're a psychopath." He skulked away in defeat, which was a source of satisfaction for me. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been feeling some irritation in my right chest. I went to my doctor after some bruising started occurring and found that one of my saline implants had ruptured. Normally this wouldn't be the world's biggest problem, but I've been told I need to have it either removed or replaced. I filed a police report, but his name isn't in any kind of system, and his phone number is apparently not valid. Ladies, watch yourselves out there. Before I tell the story, it's important to know that my dad is not, by any means, a fighter. He is not an angry man, and if anything, he's a bit meek. So this happened when I, which I'm a 20-year-old woman now, was 6 years old. My dad and I went to the supermarket, and it was one of those grocery stores where there was a hot food section where you could sit and eat, and kids under 10 ate for free. My dad and I were getting food at the buffet, and then we were going to pay at the cash register and go sit down. Now, this whole section of the supermarket was very small. That is, the tables for eating were very close to where you selected your meal. Because my meal was free, I remember asking my dad if I could go sit. He said yes, and he'd be right over again. He was probably going to be, at most, 20 feet away from me if I went to go sit before him. When I sat down, I remember a grown man, about my dad's age at the time, coming to sit directly across from me at the table. The table only sat 2 people. He said, "Do you mind if I eat with you?" And I just remember feeling so scared that I froze and went quiet. I didn't answer even though my 6-year-old impulse was to be polite. He was like my mouth wouldn't open, but the next thing I knew, before I even had time to feel rude for not being able to reply, my dad was right in this guy's face, grabbing him by the shirt collar. I don't remember exactly what he said to the man, but it was the first time, and one of the only times, I've ever seen my dad raging mad. And it was the first time I heard him use a swear word. I couldn't believe that my dad was actually grabbing someone physically. Next thing I know, security came over and my dad had called my mom, who was in the grocery store shopping, and there was a big commotion. Then we left the store. I actually haven't asked my dad about this in such a long time. Probably since I was a teenager, I sort of want to now and ask what ended up happening. This happened a few weeks ago and it was so bizarre that I still think about it every so often. Anyway, I was babysitting my nieces who were 8 and 10 years old since my sister was going out to meet this other girl at a coffee shop. I offered to babysit my nieces since her house was nice and I didn't have anything else to do that night, so I decided why not. At first we just watched movies and played video games together. Later on into the night, I noticed they didn't eat anything, and so I asked them if they were hungry. They both replied no at first. That's when I said I can make a quesadilla for them or anything else they want. They still replied no. When I mentioned pizza, they immediately yelled yes. Of course they would. Well, bad idea that night. When I called the local Pizza Hut, I ordered 2 large pizzas to be delivered. Keep in mind that I went outside to make this phone call. Quite loudly I should say, because it was dead silent outside. I only went outside because I noticed a bag on the street and I thought it was mine or somebody else's. It was just trash when I looked closely at it. I'm assuming this was the neighbor's trash bag. 20 minutes go by and I hear a doorbell ring. It was the Pizza Hut delivery delivery girl. I paid her in cash and I took the pizzas to the kitchen where my nieces were eating at. This is when the weird stuff happens. Not even 10 minutes go by and I hear the doorbell ring again. I was skeptical at first and looked out the window. It was hard to see much of anything by this point. I opened the door, only to be greeted by an old man with a pizza box in his hand. He says to me, "Hello son, I got your pizza that you ordered." I tried to answer in a way that would divert the situation. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't order any pizza, you must have got the wrong location." That's when I tried to close the door, but he pushed his hand hard on the door. "Are you sure?" He replied. I firmly replied back yes, and I closed the door. I thought that was the end of that, until one of my nieces told me, "Why is there a man just standing outside our house?" I was confused, but my heart started to pound when I thought it was the same old man from earlier. I was right. It was the same old man still standing outside the house with the pizza box still in his hand. I was absolutely livid. I opened the door furiously and yelled at him that I would call the cops immediately. He ran off. My sister arrived 2 hours later and I told her of what happened. She looked immediately concerned and then asked who it was. I told her it was an old man who impersonated a pizza delivery worker. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. This took place in 2011. I'm a 29-year-old dude now, but I was 17 at the time living in Illinois. I and my best friend, let's call Simon, had gone out in the evening to celebrate the birthday party of our mutual friend Gabe, and we had taken Simon's dad's rather beat-up Buick Century. The party itself went pretty smoothly. It's what happens after where the creepy encounter begins. Simon and I start our way back at around 10 to 10:30 at night. We decided to take the quiet, windy road back home cause it would get us home quicker. As we went through the road, we noticed somebody walking down the side of the road not too far from the nearest gas station. We found it a bit odd because she was going away from the gas station, not towards it, and we didn't see a parked car anywhere in sight. This mysterious person began coming closer towards our car and we slowed down and got a proper look at who the person was. She was an older woman, probably in her middle to late 30s with blonde hair and fair skin. She looked quite disheveled as well. We wondered if this woman was lost or something, so we stopped our car and she got closer towards us. Before we could ask her if she needed help, she noticed us and stared at us for some time before whispering "Hello boys" to us in a rather creepy, soft and seductive tone as if to try and lure us into something. We didn't know how to respond, but she quickly added, "Want me? Come with me if you do." And she began to start undressing her top in an attempt to flash us, and we knew at that moment she was most likely a hooker. We felt even more creeped out cause first of all we weren't 18 yet and this much older woman is obviously trying to lure us into something bad or potentially something worse. Of course we said no, to which the woman responded in the same seductive tone with a creepy smile to top things off. "Well, you don't want me, you say, but I can make you two change your mind and then you are going to come with me." I told Simon we needed to get out of here and he agreed. We started the car as quickly as we could, but not before I looked in the rear view mirror, seeing the woman trying to chase after us, running as fast as she could. I was worried the woman might be able to catch us before we got up to speed, but thank God we were able to escape her. Eventually we reached my home, but we were still completely spooked and shaken, and my older sister had noticed that as well and asked us if we were alright. But we didn't reply and simply nodded. I didn't have the guts to tell her what I encountered that day. There are so many things about this encounter that I think about to this very day, and I still discuss this with Simon as well. What was this woman's motive to look on the streets in the middle of the night for random young guys for whatever knows what, and was she acting alone or part of a deeper scheme? What if we gave in to her demands and went with her? Where would she have taken us? Why did she chase after us? What if she caught us after we tried to leave? I don't know, we can't say, but we both believe we definitely avoided something potentially far worse that night. I only hope that she didn't have any victims. I think this might be more dangerous than what I thought it originally was. But I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but it all started when the new school year started in August and it's only gotten worse since then. Going back to the first incident with him, it was the first day of school and it was my first day of high school. So I was new to the school. My friends and I were walking around trying to find out classes when I realized I forgot to fill my water bottle, so I told them I'd be right back and went to find a bathroom. Of course then I got lost, so I had to ask someone to help me find the bathroom. I asked the closest person to me, which happened to be him. I ask him if he can show me where the bathroom is. He says yes. I tell him thank you and we make small talk. He asks if I'm a freshman. I told him yes. He told me he's a junior and he told me his name. Then he asked mine, which I stupidly told him because he seemed nice enough. So he leads me to the bathroom and I tell him thanks again, expecting him to walk away, but he didn't. Instead he sat and waited while I filled up my water bottle. I'm must have given him a look or something, because he then said he is going to walk me to my first class. I said thank you because I thought the gesture was nice. So he walks me to the class, but before I can go in, he asks me for my number, which I stupidly gave him. He texts me that entire class period. I eventually shut my phone off because the text got annoying. After the class was over, my friends and I started walking to our next class. When we ran into him, he pulled me by my arm fairly aggressively like it left bruises, and starts asking me why I didn't respond to any of his texts and how I'm rude and disrespectful. I told him I shut my phone off because I didn't want to get in trouble. He accepted the answer, but I could tell he was still mad. I didn't see him again until the end of the day. I was walking out of the school and going to untie my bike. Because I had biked to school, my house was walking distance. When I was untying my bike, he asked if I was biking home. I said yes because I live close. He offered me a ride, which I politely declined because I didn't know him that well and I didn't feel comfortable. He said okay and left. As I was biking home though, I noticed a black car that was following me all the way to my house and sat at the end of my driveway watching me put my bike away. I wanted to see who it was, and so I went to look, and guess who came out of the car? Hibbo. I asked what he was doing and he said he wanted to make sure I got home safe. I said that I was fine and that he didn't have to do that. He insisted it was necessary. I said goodbye and went inside. The next few weeks at school, he would constantly follow me, text me through almost all my classes, and whenever I would talk to anyone else, he would get so upset at me. He would follow me home with his car every day to make sure I got home safe or something I don't know. I was getting annoyed of him following me everywhere and constantly having eyes on me, so I ended up telling him to stop following me and blocking his number. He was very angry. After I did that, the next few days after were bad. Every time he ran into me in the halls, he would yell at me in front of everyone and say how horrible of a person I am. One time when we were next to the bathrooms, he shoved me up against the wall and held me against the wall saying how I better unblock him or else. I didn't know how to respond, but I cried. Thankfully, a teacher overheard the whole thing and made him get off of me. He was suspended, and that solved the issue at school. But later that night, I was at home and it was maybe 10:30 at night. I was watching television when I see someone flashing their headlights directly outside of my window. I look out and it's his car. He doesn't do anything, just sits and keeps flashing his lights. I close my blinds and tell my sister because our mom works overnight, so we usually put ourselves to bed and she's back in the morning. Plus my sister's is always home and she's an adult, so I'm okay. She goes and looks out the window and he's there still. She locks the door and says to just hang out in the living room, and that he probably needed something but it's late and he will have to wait. He came and sat outside my house every night that week. Later they're probably around midnight, so my sister was already asleep. I pretended to be, but I was always woken up by his stupid bright headlights. He never did anything, just sat outside my house. But then he just stopped and I got like a week's break. Until this past week, I was getting ready for bed a few nights ago and I saw his headlights again, but this time only for a few seconds, and then they shut off, and it was only a few minutes before I heard knocking on my window. I lost it and went and got my sister, who called the police, but again before they could even come he was gone. I gave them his name and they said they would look into it. He ended up denying ever being at my house, so it was just his word against mine because we didn't have cameras. They ended up making him sign something saying he won't come to my house anymore and will keep out of contact with me. I'm not sure what it was though. He didn't come back to my house anymore this week, but he has been giving me looks at school, so for the love of God, please leave me alone. I'm still scared he might do something worse. This all started about a month ago, starting quote-unquote innocently enough that I just didn't really care too much. I live in a townhouse and my neighbor who I share a wall with has had someone recently move in with him, a man who I assume is his brother. The first instance was me laying in bed reading and I could hear some slight breathing or a general sense that I am being listened to. This escalated through the next few weeks with this man whacking it nearly every night when my window was open. I would look outside quickly to see who it was and I could never get a glimpse of this person. I was so confused how they could scale the 6-foot fence back in my yard that quickly. From that, it escalated to him whacking it at all hours of the day on random days. On the days he did it, he would do it all day. My bedroom window and my living room window and kitchen window downstairs on opposite sides of house. I thought I was losing it, like, are there more than one person? How does this person run away so fast? But I was just like, whatever. I'm a man too, so I didn't feel particularly threatened. I had a bat in each room just in case. This is when stuff went sideways last night. The whacking, it was on another level, and I kept hearing breathing in my basement, and it sounded like someone was in the walls. I kept running to windows and downstairs looking everywhere. Again, I could never find this person. This whole night I thought I was losing myself. I was extra vigilant, listening in silence in my room. And then I heard it. The man was walking on my roof and peering over where my window was in my bedroom. I freaked out, pushed open my attic, and thank God he was not inside the attic, but opening it allowed me to hear his footsteps on the outside roof crystal clear. Every time someone would be walking on his side and potentially see him, he would run back to other side and hide. I called my brother to come come try get a picture of him. This part is embarrassing. I pretending I was whacking it off to lure him to my window close. That was when he would go wild. He took off when bro was down there. He was crunching leaves, I think, I'm not sure. Well, now I know I'm not crazy because I can hear him perfectly clear, and on top of that I can hear him perfectly clear and run back into my neighbor's house when he gets too spooked. Well, this is the really scary part. I have a very small window in the basement in a pretty old house that I had absolutely no idea was even able to be opened. Turns out a cannon was unlocked. The man has been in my basement for God knows how many times. For some reason, I don't feel particularly that scared. I have a feeling he is disabled or something and feel bad for him. I've seen his hand opening the back door, seeing me, and then running back inside, and it was really dirty. I think he is scared of me because he ran so fast in that house when he saw me backyard, but then crawled back out so I couldn't see him from fence, and you guessed it, whacked it off really loud. So I said out loud to him, if he doesn't stop going on my roof or entering my house, I'm going to tell his brother and the cops potentially. I'm totally assuming this, but I have a feeling the brother took him in because he had nowhere to go and is disabled in some way, so I'm scared he will kick him out. Now all my windows are locked top and bottom, and at least it's almost winter, so at least I don't mind to keep windows shut. I told the police non-emergency what's up and identify him in case there has been any other instances in neighborhood and or I have the bat as ribs one day in my house. This happened a few years ago, but I still feel uneasy every time I see a car that looks similar to this one. I am a weed smoker, and usually when I'm alone I love to light a joint and relax. I had just moved into a new apartment, and I didn't want to risk upsetting neighbors or worse violating my lease by smoking inside, so I went out to my car to smoke in the parking lot. It was at around 12. I parked my car a ways down from my apartment so none of my new neighbors could see me. I was worried about making a bad impression. I was at the end of a dead-end street with one street light lit for the area. There are parked cars around me, but it is dead silent outside, so I assumed I was the only one in the area. I smoked my joint, listened to music, and scrolled on my phone until I was ready to head back to my place. I was in this spot for about half an hour. Again, there was no cars coming in or out during this time. There was also no people around either. Once I decided to head back, I backed my car out of the spot and angled it to begin driving down the road. Immediately, a blue Ford Fusion pulls out of the parking spot a few down from me and pulls right in front of me, facing me, and blocking my way. We both sat there for a few minutes and I began to become scared. I was blocked in and this car was not moving. Its headlights were blinding. After what felt like an eternity, the car finally drove forward and moved to the side, very slowly. I drove past it as it sat there still. I tried to glance in the window as I passed to get a look at who the person was, but they were tinted. I drove to my apartment and ran inside as fast as I could. I spent the rest of the night feeling uneasy. I was scared they would come to my door. My boyfriend came over the next day and I told him what had happened, how I had a gut feeling something wasn't right. It wasn't a person playing a prank, but someone genuinely wanted to scare me. A week goes by and I didn't see the car, so I thought it was just a one-time event. My boyfriend and I decided to go grab some food, so we pulled out of my neighborhood and stopped at the stop sign before we entered the main road. As we're sitting at the stop sign, I see the blue Ford Fusion pulling in, passing me. It felt like slow motion. I tried looking into the window again, but couldn't see past the tent. Despite this, I could feel the person inside that car staring at me. I started to panic and pointed to the car and told my boyfriend that's it. That's the car that blocked me in the parking lot. I pulled out from the stop sign, and as I did, I could see this car in my rear view mirror turning around and begin to follow me. I began making sharp random turns in an attempt to lose them, however they were on my tail. I was shaking and close to tears at that point. Eventually I did lose the car, and that was the last time I saw it. I still wondered, why did they follow me? What did they want from me? Was it a joke? Or did this person have the intentions my gut was telling me they did? It's been 2 years, and every time I see a blue Ford Fusion, my first instinct is to check for tinted windows. So this experience has stuck in my mind and I remember it like yesterday. When I was probably 10 or 11, year was probably 2000 or 2001, I was at our local park with a friend riding our bikes. And this particular park was super cool because it was practically a skater/biker's dream. There was stairs and ledges and natural jumps built into the layout of this patio plaza, which then led down to a sandy beach line of our local lake. So normally it's pretty busy and you get kicked out by random hero adults or lifeguards telling you that you can't have fun here and to go elsewhere, but this was an overcast, kinda cooler middle to lower 50 degrees kind of day, so the park was completely empty besides me and my buddy. So after an hour or two we're starting to get bored and noticed it was getting late in the day, maybe about 5:30 or 6 in the afternoon, and sunset was about an hour, maybe an hour and half away tops. I'm talking dark, no more sun, street lights all kind of sunset. About 30 minutes prior to this I had noticed a van, I think it was either white or possibly off-white like eggshell colored, pull up in the parking lot and parked facing us directly, which was probably about 300 to 400 feet away. I couldn't see the driver too well, but I know for a fact he never got out and nobody got in. At first no big deal, but after about 30 to 45 minutes, during which I would occasionally look in his direction every 5 to 10 minutes or so, and every last time he was staring straight dead ahead at us. He wasn't preoccupied with anything or anyone else. My buddy started to notice this too, and while I started to get this weird feeling something wasn't right, I didn't mention it in such a way that would seem like I'm thinking, this guy's going to kidnap us and do weird stuff to us. I simply replied, yes, I noticed him too, that's odd, but left it at that. So it's now about 20 to 30 minutes before dark and we've gathered our things and decided to leave. Luckily there was a really busy gas station across the street from the park, maybe a fourth to half a mile from the parking lot / plaza area. But as we start making our way down one of the multiple paved walkie paths that lead to the exit, me and my friend noticed this van had started its engine and was proceeding to back out of the parking spot. So now we're a little on edge and we rush to the mini market. We go inside and both were like, what? And thought that was kind of startling, but proceeded to wait in line to buy our candy and momentarily forgot about what just happened. Unfortunately, as we walked out the door of the store, we see the same janky van sitting across the 4-lane roadway at the park's turn and entrance with his blinker on, just sitting there. And mind you, we were in the store a good 5 to 7 minutes. There's no way he couldn't have safely merged into traffic. Luckily for my friend, he lived maybe 5 minutes away from the mini market, just had to ride straight behind the mini market about 10 to 12 blocks, all of which was 2 or 3 heavily lighted residential type roads straight home. And unfortunately for me, my house was probably about 15 minutes away, maybe less, but I had to ride north of the gas station mini market along this kind of rural highway / higher speed road, like 45 to 50 miles per hour with no houses directly on it, and a street light every like half a mile if I'm lucky, before turning onto a different 25 miles per hour rural kind of road that was sparsely dotted with houses, before taking a third turn onto my heavily populated normal neighborhood that has eyes and ears it would certainly see a child getting abducted. My friend pretty much was like, best of luck, I'm out, and took off towards his, while I started my short ride back home as well. So I'm about to turn off the higher speed highway kind of road and look over my left shoulder as I turn right, and what do I see? That same van driving by my road, and after passing me also immediately starting to slow down. It was like slow motion. I can still picture the fear I felt when I saw the brake lights on the van. Mind you, he didn't slam on the brakes or do anything that would draw attention or be considered erratic or reckless, but my first instinct and thought was he was slowing down to turn around and double back. I never, even to this day, had ridden / pedaled a bike as fast or as hard as I did that evening. Literally every once of my being was put into going faster than I had ever gone, the entire time thinking this van is going to pull up next to me and do whatever. I was pedaling so hard, just staring straight at the ground, focusing on my feet, that I almost ran into a parked car like 2 blocks from my house. It was literally inches away from running head on into the car. I never bothered to look back once I saw those brake lights. I didn't want to know how close or far whoever was driving that van was from me. All I knew is I was scared, and best believe I'm not going to be kidnapped without the perpetrator having to work for it. Anyway, I made it home but never told my parents. Even to this day, I never brought it up and I don't know why. So this happened a few years ago, and my brain is still fuzzy because honestly I've kind of blocked this out from my memory. My older sister, who was 23 at the time, and myself, when I was 20 at the time, went to Washington DC one year, and I was super excited because I'd never been before. We started the trip with a private tour of the Capitol building where one of her friends worked at the time. I was honestly super stoked. Even though I had already become disenchanted with politics at that age, it was still really cool to be in the building and learning about the history of the country. After that, we went to the Smithsonian and just genuinely had a lot of fun educating each other in the different subject we were always into. I was always more math than science oriented, and she was English and history. At the end of one of the days, we were headed to the metro station to get a train back to our hotel. Now, I'd been on train platforms like this before, having visited my uncle in New York City a couple of times, and since then been stationed in Chicago with their metro system, so I have a pretty good understanding of how trains and stops work. My sister said she needed to go to the bathroom and to wait for her before I got in the train, and I told her alright before making my way to the kiosk to reload my card. While I was at the kiosk, I got this feeling that someone was looking at me, that overwhelming feeling of just being watched, and it was uncomfortable. I turned my head a little, and there, standing in the corner, was what I can only assume to be a homeless man based off his appearance. staring right at me with huge eyes. At first, I thought nothing of it, as we had people like this back home in Florida too, and went back to what I was doing. I pulled out my phone and started playing a game or something while I waited. Before long, my sister came back and we got on our train. We talked for a bit about what time we were getting up the next morning to catch our flight back, since it was later in the day around noon. When she started to open her mouth, I froze. Standing in the back of the train car, staring at both of us, was the same man I'd seen earlier. I'll never forget his outfit: a dirty gray hoodie, matted brown hair, a face that looked like he suffered from heavy substance abuse, dingy skin, ragged blue jeans, and shoes with holes in them. I leaned in, not breaking eye contact, and said, "That guy was staring at me earlier and now he's still watching us on the train." She looked at him and whispered, "If he gets off when we do, we'll make a dead sprint to the hotel." Honestly, I don't know why we didn't call the police, but knowing where our hotel was, on the end of town where things started to get sketchier, I don't think it would have made much difference for response time. The train stopped at our station and we got off. I didn't see the man follow us, so I thought we were fine. It was still about a 5-block walk to the hotel and in a really sketchy part of town. It's not that we were cheapskates, it's just all we could afford in all honesty. As we walked, we continued our previous conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I turned around and saw the man hidden behind a brick wall, peeking out. I froze. My sister turned around and saw him too. When he realized he'd been busted, he stood straight up and gave a big, cracked grin and just kept staring. I wanted to challenge him, being 6'3" and 215 pounds at the time, and yell, "What do you want?" But I remembered my previous encounter with someone following me and just froze, barely squeaking out, "What?" It was about this time the man started walking towards us. I wasn't frozen anymore. We both started a dead sprint toward the hotel. As terrifying as the situation was already, what happened next still makes every hair on my body stand straight up. The man screamed absolute nonsense loudly before letting out a cackle, chasing after us. I was lagging behind my sister a little so she could get to safety before me. She was smaller than me and I knew, if I needed to, I could maybe fight this guy. I grabbed my wallet from my pocket and pulled out the room key, since it was one of those hotels where you needed to have a key to access the building. Once we were inside, I realized just how far away the guy was from me. I played football in high school, and I was still pretty fast, and I had to have had about 10 or 15 yards between us, even if I was running slower. We didn't say anything. We just went upstairs to our room and made sure it was locked in every way possible. We left super early and took an Uber to the airport. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.